Hey everybody, I'm gonna give myself lots of space here. I'm gonna try to remember to talk into the microphone so everybody can hear me. Is that cool, banjo? All right, so I'm Tom Watkins. I'm the president and co-owner of McMurray Hatchery. We're gonna talk about beginning chickens. We're gonna give ourselves a lot of time today for questions because each chicken keeper is unique. So we're gonna have, sometimes those are the best things, is the question things. So, like I said, I'm the president of McMurray Hatchery. We're 107 years old before that, so we're still a family-owned hatchery. I tend to the day-to-day sales of everything with McMurray Hatchery. I also manage the flocks. We have about 50,000 laying hens. We hatch about 5 million chickens a year. We have 110 varieties of chickens. The vast majority are heritage and chickens that we've had. We've had 30 varieties for all 107 years. We've had over 100 for about 60 of those years. So we've been doing this a really long time, and chickens are really important. They're more important now than ever. So we're going to talk about that too. So welcome. Trying to think. I'm not nervous. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So, so there's thank you. There's an Irish toast that says, "May you live as long as you want and never want as long as you live." And there's another toast that says, "Bread, eggs, and milk," but that's French toast. So let's move on to some chickens. All right. Cool. All right, so basically, the life stages of a chicken. This is beginning chicken, so it might seem very simple. I'm going to speak tomorrow on advanced chicken, which will be a little bit more in depth, because everyone's chicken journey is unique. So, the life stages of a chicken. Obviously, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It was, I don't know, an egg. There's no right answer. It's a trick question. So, the egg, most people eat eggs, so I incubate all of our eggs. So like I said, we hatch 5 million eggs a year, so that's quite a few. So out of the egg, we incubate them 21 days. That's my wife. Hey, baby. Within that, you get a chick, you hatch a chick, 21 days in the incubator at 95.5 degrees will get you a chicken, so a 1-day-old chicken. They will spend 4 weeks in a brooder. So chickens, when they hatch, they're covered in down. They don't regulate their body temperature very well. So they're much like a baby. So you're keeping a constant temperature. So that's the biggest thing. Today, they don't need a lot of heat because it's plenty warm. That's why most people start in the spring when the temperature gets warmer. And you don't have to supplement their heat very much. So 1 to 4 weeks in a brooder until they get their feathers. So you can overbrood chickens, and so they don't actually come into their feathers as fast. So they need a little bit of stress in order to help produce feathers. So the faster, there's a line there, but you'll figure it out. A maximum of 95 degrees. So for the first week, typically we would reduce that temperature 5 degrees per week. For the first 4 weeks, and then they should be fully feathered. About 4 weeks old, that's when you can start put them outside, with exceptions. So the biggest detriment to chickens is the temperature swings. They can handle very hot temperatures. They can handle very cold temperatures. It's the difference in temperature. It affects people too. If you're outside working all day and you go inside in the air conditioning, you get nauseous. You get sick. It's very same with chickens. So the biggest is temperature swings. So we're watching out. If you're going to have a really big temperature swing while you're brooding chickens or when they're first going outside, they might need to be inside or in a brooder or in an enclosed space a little bit longer. After about that first 4 weeks, you're going to get a pullet. A pullet is a technical term. It's anything less than 1 year old. Way to tell the age, sometimes it gets hard to tell the age of a hen or a rooster is their breastbone, the keel. About a 1 year old, they're still going to have a soft keel. That's actually one of the defining factors within the USDA that says that what the difference between a broiler and a fryer is the softer keel. So hens and cockerels are anything over 1 year old with a hard keel. You'll see the hard breastbone. It's kind of neat. So roosters don't produce sperm until 6 months old. So some people have young roosters, so they're not fertile yet. This is the life cycle of an egg. So we can age our eggs within incubation. So this is an incubating egg. So at any point in the incubation cycle, I can break open an egg. I can tell you exactly how many days old that is, with exceptions. If you have fertilized eggs at home, if you've got a rooster at home, the option is you've got fertilized eggs. Fertilized eggs are absolutely edible, so there's nothing wrong with that. They don't contain anything extra except for a little spot. You'll see that first little spot. It's completely harmless. There's nothing wrong with it. Anything over 80 degrees will technically incubate an egg. Not successfully, but if your house is 80 degrees, 90 degrees, you are incubating the eggs. So fresh eggs don't need to be refrigerated. They're sitting on your cupboard. It might start to grow. Just a little FYI. They'll get real soft. It's not pleasant. The biggest thing for new chicken keepers is how much space do they need. In the industry, so within our pens, we do on-floor raised birds. We start at about 2 square foot per bird. And as the year progresses, typically the hens will continue to mature and give space. We'll actually give them more space. So we progress the space. 2 foot is the minimum needed. With an outside run, it should be as large as possible, especially if you plan on keeping any grass, because chickens love nothing more than scratching up their grass, and they will do that relentlessly until it's dirt or mud. So the more space you can give them, the longer you're going to keep that grass, or you can move them. But you have to move them a lot. Chickens need 1 foot, 1 linear foot of roosting space. Each hen, and it depends on your breed too, but each hen wants to roost at night. That's how they sleep. That's their normal predator prevention would be to get up in the tree. They like to roost. It actually gives them more space within the coop because it gives them, you're using your vertical space as well. So bigger breeds like a Brahma or Cochin are going to need more square foot. They're bigger birds. One big key here is the feeder space. So when you are considering your chicken coop and you're considering the max number of birds you're going to be able to put in their coop, you need to subtract the feeder space that feeder takes up and your waterer space. So that's not usable square footage within your coop. So if you have an 8x8 coop, that's 64 square feet, but you need to subtract, 1 foot per water, 1 foot per feeder, typically. It depends on what you're using. So give that a consideration because that does not count in towards your total square footage. Especially when you're raising broilers. The number one thing with broilers is feeder space. They can share the water, they can make do, but to keep a uniform body, they need to all be able to eat at one time. If they don't, they're going to start pushing each other out. You're going to have a big difference between your birds because they're keeping some off the feeder. So the one's going to never move. He's going to stick there all the time. So these are minimum, so you can never go over 1.3 inches for feeder space. Why I say 3 to 8 weeks there, between the first 2 weeks, I actually put out pretty much food and water so they're tripping over it. They are literally living on food and water. I can give them complete access to food so they can find it at any time. And I put out more waterers than I think I'm going to need. So I might have, in a space this big, I might have 4 waterers and 4 feeders. So I don't really mind if they live on it. They can naturally scratch. That's what they're going to do. But they have access to feed and water at any point, anywhere they can get to, so they don't have to search for it. I do dip beaks. Even if it's 10,000 birds, I dip beaks. Maybe not all of them, but a percentage of them for sure. That's where you physically take your day-old chick and you take its beak and you dip it in the water. That's the first ones to find the water. They will naturally find it on their own. I like to make sure that they know where that water is, and the first ones there, you put their beak in it, they start drinking. So it helps them get off to a better start. So as they're getting older, you need more feeder space. So 3 inches is probably in a brooder, minimum, and then the water space, they need less water space. They typically share water is a lot easier. More chickens equal cheaper eggs. So this is kind of an interesting point. You cannot produce chicken eggs as cheap as you can buy them in the store. There's no way to do it. So chicken farms are vertically integrated. They own the pasture, they own the field, they own everything within that they're getting the bare minimum amount of food in their life. They're producing the breeds that are going to produce the most eggs for the cheapest amount of feed. So feed is your biggest cost outside of your coop. So you can go to the grocery store and buy a dozen eggs for 99 cents. You know, depending on where you are, they might run a sale. You might get 18 eggs for the same price. You can't do that at home. It just doesn't, the math doesn't work out. But the more birds you have, it does shrink the overall cost of those eggs. Again, but it's important to know how many eggs you want. Whether you plan on selling eggs, whether you plan on running a bakery, whether, you know, how do you get rid of them? It's either feast or famine with eggs. You either don't have enough or you have too many. So there's no in between. And once you get a good clientele where you're selling eggs, then something will happen, and then, you know, raccoon will take out half your flock, because that's nature. So one of the biggest things is with maximizing chickens in your space. In Iowa, we're in Iowa, we're in central Iowa. Our winters are kind of cold, they get kind of harsh. The more chickens produce enough heat where we don't have to add supplemental heat. I do run heaters in our barns, but I wouldn't necessarily have to. So if we get the power storm, we're actually keeping that building with just the chickens in it above 40-some degrees. They're perfectly content. We don't have to change our water lines. They will produce their own heat. It's if the space isn't too large. So the biggest thing with chickens is water. All right, so an adult hen will use 1 pint of water per day in a typical climate setting. So that changes by everybody. So each, you know, here in Tennessee, it's 90 degrees. If this is the chicken's normal, that's not a concern. If this is the average temperature, like I said, the biggest concern is the temperature swings, the variations that they're going to, you know, if I shipped a chicken from Canada to Texas, you know, it's 47 degrees, and, you know, and then it's 110, I think it is right now, currently in Texas. It's on fire. That's going to cause that chicken to, it's stress, a lot of stress. And once the chicken is stressed, you're going to run into, you know, it's the same with people. You know, stress wears a body down, and it will give you lots of problems. So the biggest misconception, I think, with chickens is they will drink more water in the summer, but that's the opposite. They will actually drink more water in the winter. They're using that water in order, your body is producing heat. So a chicken needs more water in the winter. They just go through more water. So in the winter, they'll use up to 2 pints. So they'll double the amount of water that they're drinking, but they're also expelling a lot more manure. So they'll typically have wetter manure in the winter, which is, winter sucks. But how much do they eat? To get one chick to lay, so between 22 to 24 weeks, it takes about 50 pounds of feed. So it depends on what you're feeding for feed. You can get, if you're buying organic feed at $40 a bag, it's about $40 to get that first egg out of that chick. That doesn't include any heat. That doesn't include the coop. So about $40 to get that first egg. After that, a hen will eat about a quarter pound of food per day. It's not a lot. It's not. But they also waste about a quarter pound of food. Anybody who has chickens know that they're kicking it out. They're spilling it over. So one way to combat that is to raise your feeders up. So as they age, if the chicks get bigger, if you raise the feeder up as high as you can, so they're just able to stand and eat. They're not pecking it out. So chickens are like people. They're picking out their favorite parts of feed. I prefer pelleted feed over granular, because they're not able to pick out the pieces that they like. In a granular feed, they're picking out the corn. Corn is fats and carbohydrates. That's your bread. You know, tastes great. You know, everybody loves toast, but it's not a complete nutrition for the chickens. So they need the micronutrients and macronutrients in order to be at their peak, in order to continue to lay eggs. So a 50-pound bag will last one chicken 100 days or 100 chickens one day. I have about 300 birds at home in my own coop, so that's 3 bags of feed per day that I go through. So I buy feed from our local co-op. It costs $14 for just a layer feed. So I didn't include it on here because everyone's different. But nutritionally, a chick between that brooder stage and laying stage will start on what's called a chick starter or a chick grower. That's got a higher protein. It's actually got a higher amino acid. It's got more lysine. It's got more probiotics within that feed that allows them to digest more of the protein within it. So that helps their body grow. They're putting on a lot of body weight. So it is pretty important that you start them on a starter and then continue with a grower, and then when they get about that 20-some weeks, you can put them on a layer. The only difference between layer and grower is it has more calcium in it. So you'll go from about 0.5% calcium to about a 4% calcium. So you're looking, a chick starter is somewhere between 16 and 18% protein. A grower is, I think, 12 to 16%, and a layer is about 16% protein as well. So it is important. I have raised birds on everything. I've raised chicks that I've fed starter. I've fed them on layer. They're pretty adaptable. They will survive on whatever you feed them, as long as it's some kind of complete feed where it has the carbs, fats, and proteins and amino acids in it. They will be survived. Yes, ma'am. Do I recommend medicated feed? That's a terrific question. I typically don't buy medicated feed. Coccidiosis, so you're putting a coccidiostat in the medicated feed. I try to avoid that because I also feed chicken feed to my pigs. So and you can't feed medicated feed to turkeys, ducks, or geese because they'll eat too much. They'll actually overdose on the coccidiostat within it. Coccidiosis is a protozoa, single-cell organism. It's microscopic. It lives pretty much on everything. It's on this dirt. It's on this wall. It's on this TV. It's everywhere. And it's not necessarily an issue until you get into a coop where it's a warm, wet environment, and that actually will flourish the coccidiostat. And so then I look for it, but it's also how you're managing your coop. If your coop is typically wet, or if it's a wet, rainy season, you should look for it a little bit more. The signs of coccidiosis is blood in their stool. So you'll have diarrhea, and you'll see the red blood in their stool. It's really easy to treat. You can go get Corid or Amprolium. It's the same stuff that they would put in the feed to help. Why I don't feed medicated feed is they will build up a natural immunity to it, but they need to do it slowly. And so once you feed medicated feed, you're not allowing them to build up an immunity to it. So even if you treat them later with a coccidiostat, they have to restart that process. So it depends on your brooding, and I know exactly how I brood and how clean, which isn't super clean. I'm not a clean freak. Chickens don't need to be, if you're putting sand down, you don't have to scoop out litter to get all the manure out. They're fine. They actually, we're on a tangent here now, but it's all good. So chickens, you can be too clean. So in your brooding process, so chickens need to ingest their own manure, because it has the coccidios in it. But it needs to be about every 4 weeks. So they're literally scratching the floor and pecking their poop, and they're eating it, and that's within the same environment. They're creating their own immunity to coccidiosis. So too clean is the opposite. We kind of did that with asthma, the same thing with people. So don't be too clean. So you probably didn't expect to hear that. In winter, your winter is different than our winter, but everyone is a little bit unique. Unless you're in like South Florida, they don't have winter, or Southern California. Chickens will naturally reduce their lay in winter. It's the shorter daylight hours. Chickens need 14 to 16 daylight hours to produce an egg. There's a lot of reasons for this. If you are trying to produce eggs, you should very much consider putting a light in the coop. It will, there are a lot of schools of thought on much like a woman, a hen has the maximum number of eggs that she has in her body at any given time. So it's the same. It's ovulation that produces an egg. So by adding light, you are going to shorten the maximum number of the lifespan of, you're not shortening the lifespan, you're shortening the longevity of her ability to lay eggs, but you're going to get them front-loaded instead of long-term. After about 12 to 16, 18 months, you're going to end up going into a molt, which is actually on the next slide. But I don't know. We'll cover that one. So you need light in the winter to produce eggs. So chickens get their vitamin D from the sun, just like people do. So they need that vitamin D in order to absorb calcium, in order to produce eggs. So the biggest thing with winter is chickens are very humid. So they expel moisture from their mouth. And humidity within a closed coop, the problem is people close their coops up and they're not allowing ventilation to come in. And so the problem with winter is the low ventilation, high humidity. So your bedding's wet because they're drinking more water, and then you're not expelling the air to the outside. And so humidity and wet environments are the detriment to chickens. So every chicken disease is respiratory, like almost all of them. We'll cover part of that in tomorrow's session too, because it's really interesting. We're not going to do that right now. So moisture produces bacteria, and parasite growth, coccidiosis, or I can read it. So coccidia are a subclass of microscopic spore-forming single-celled obligate intracellular parasites belonging to a Apicomplexian class of Conodontidae and frostbite. So with wet, humid environments, you're more likely to get frostbite on your combs. So the different types of chickens have bigger combs, and you're looking to frostbite. You can get frostbite on their feet. They can lose their toes. That's because it's wet and cold. So cold is not a detriment to chickens. Chickens are adapted to every climate. They're everywhere in the world, except for Antarctica. So they're fine in cold under most, but you need ventilation. You need to have windows open. You need to have be exchanging the outside air. It's the same with people. It's not really any different. People get, bronchitis, because of the, stale air. So ventilation is more necessary than heat. Molting. Chickens will technically molt their second season. So most people put chicks down in the spring, and they'll continue to lay through the summer. They'll probably reduce through the winter, and they'll pick back up. About 2 years old is when they'll do that first molt. So a chicken will lose all of its feathers in stages. So sometimes it's fast, and they'll just go completely bald, which is actually great because it reduces the amount of time that they're molting. Sometimes it'll be individual feathers, which can be really, really slow. The chickens do not produce eggs while they're molting, or it's very reduced. So molting can take anywhere from 2 to 6 months. So at this point, all commercial farms replace their flocks. So if you're, anybody, so they don't go through the molting process unless you're doing a breeders, because then there's a different set of that. But so this is where your commercial farms replace their birds, about 24 months old. This is when you'll see that really steep decline in eggs, or you won't get any eggs at all. So if you're selling eggs, have a plan before you get there. So each year after molting, a hen will produce about 80% of the eggs that it produced the last year. A hen can live very easily 10 years. So if you're getting 200 eggs the first year, you're probably looking at 180 the second year. That's all math. I'm not going to do the math, but you can figure it out. So the oldest chicken, not super confirmed because it's really hard to confirm how old chickens are. It's like 22 years old. I think it's still alive. But selecting breed from your flock. Everybody's chicken flock is going to look different. Like I said, we have 110 varieties of chickens. So there are 1,600 different varieties in the world. So there are a lot. Chickens are adaptable. They live everywhere. So, and you can create new varieties. New ones are being crossed every day. So chickens are, as a species, are doing really well. So it really depends on what you want out of your chickens. There are better egg layers. There are better show birds. McMurray Hatchery sells a lot of 4-H kids. So they're kind of a combination of show and eggs. Chickens are pets. A lot of people anybody have a pet chicken? There's a few in here. So we talk a lot about chicken TV. Chickens are interesting. They're out in your yard. They become just like any other pet. They have personalities too. Your weather should play a role in your climate should play a role in the breeds you select, because you can read any breed anywhere, but it does become harder. You can read Cochins in Texas, in South Florida. It's just they're going to need more cooling. They're fully feathered. Cochins have feathers all the way down their legs. They're hefty. They're really downy. That means that they don't expel heat very well. They have very small combs. They're very cold, hardy birds. So you can do it anywhere you want. It's just how it's more work to do ones that aren't really meant for your climate. So here, you pretty mild winters. It's warm, but it's not like super hot. You could pretty much raise anything you want. It's kind of similar with Iowa. Obviously we raise all 110 breeds in Iowa, so everything's doable. But your experience level. There are different chickens that are harder to raise. Chickens have different intellect. Some of them are, I will say, very dumb. Some chickens are very dumb. I'm not going to name Polish or anything, but they're. Why is there meat? We can absolutely talk about meat. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So why don't I have meat on there? Because I didn't let anybody look at it, when I was doing it. That's why, This is my marketing team right here, and they're seeing this for the first time, and they're not happy. I like to surprise them now and again. So, chickens fall into categories. So there's layers, and there's meat birds, and then we're called dual-purpose birds. So, dual purpose is I don't want to say a misnomer, but it is definitely not what you think. Dual purpose stems back from anywhere before 1960 in the United States. So dual purpose bird was one that you also did for meat, which was literally every breed of chicken before 1960. All of them, whether it was a Polish or not, they were all also eaten. A white leghorn was your typical. That's your grocery store chicken. A white leghorn lays the white eggs. They're the most uniform. They're about a 3-pound bird. That is not a big carcass. So that's full feathered, alive bird. So you're looking at a 1.5 pound carcass weight that was fried chicken. So dual purpose breeds aren't. I don't say people's expectation of what a meat bird has changed significantly. So everyone's got a Cornish cross, a Red Ranger, Freedom Ranger, something like that. Those are meat birds. The closest thing to, I think, a dual-purpose bird would be a Freedom Ranger or like a New Hampshire Red, which is the basis of the Freedom Ranger anyway. They're actually a decent-sized carcass. They also lay and produce a good amount of eggs. Everything has specialized in the last, 70 years. So you either produce eggs or you produce meat. So if you're going to raise meat birds, you've got about 5 options. So you can come see me anytime. We'll talk about meat birds. So they're delicious. Meat birds. There's a whole nother conversation in there. Next year's, yeah. I probably covered some of this there. Anyway, so egg machines. So if your goal is eggs, everyone's first goal is eggs. You get chickens for eggs. So nobody's going to get chicken like, I really just want to keep it forever. Like that's, nobody loves chickens that much. So production breeds, sex links, leghorns, you're looking at 200, 250 eggs per year in that first year. Again, look at about 20% less of that every subsequent year. They go through a molt. Heritage breeds. This is what McMurray Hatchery does best. So we have raising our bread and butter is heritage breed chickens. So the ones that have been around, heritage breed chicken has to be 100 years old. So they've been around as long as we have, or a lot longer. Heritage breeds, Rhode Island Reds, New Hampshires, Plymouth Rocks, Australorps, Americanas. Like I said, there's about 1,600 breeds. A heritage breed is any breed that's going to produce an offspring that looks like it and shares the same characteristics with it. So that includes egg production, heat tolerance. All of those things are going to be as same with the parent as they are with the offspring. Your production breeds are not going to look, if you breed them, they're not going to look anything alike, and they're not going to produce anything like they would in the next generation. So people don't breed those on a farm, on a homestead. They're not necessarily, they're not sustainable. They will breed, they will produce a chick, but they're not going to have the same qualities of the one you started with. And meat birds especially, they don't even breed meat birds. They're artificially inseminated. Show birds, so 4-H. So again, we sell a lot of birds to 4-H. Some breeds are better than others to show. Some get hard. The standard of perfection is put out by the American Poultry Association, and it's got the lists of breeds and the qualities of those breeds all the way from, they're all very, very similar in what they say. That's the standard of perfection. So when you are talking about chicks to show or for 4-H, you need to get more than one. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to get 25 Rhode Island Reds, and then we're going to get one, Lavender Orpington to show at the fair. They're like, the problem with that is even though it's a heritage breed and it's going to produce the same chicks of the same rough quality, it doesn't give you any room for selection. There are variations in every bird. We're all here. Look around. Nobody looks the same. I've got, it's the same with chickens. While they're going to look similar in the chicken world, they're not identical. So I've got two brothers that you wouldn't know were my brothers. So it's just genetics. So there are small variations within that altogether. So if you are going to show birds or do them for 4-H, you should get at least 25 birds and a standard of perfection and find the bird that most matches that qualification. So that's really important. That's also important if you're going to breed birds. So if, in what I do, we cull. We select the best chickens to provide, again, matching on that standard of perfection for the next generation. So some really good ones are Langshans, the black and white Langshans. It's also black Langshans happen to be my favorite chicken. That's Fred. That's a black Langshan. He's a really cool bird. He drowned though. That's chickens. Chickens don't live very long. He was really nice though. Crevecoeurs, Menorcas, Faverolles, salmon Faverolles are terrific birds. Modern games, BB Red games, they're all good variations to show or to start with. But also check out the standard perfection, and they'll give you a lot more options there too. So. Pet chickens. A lot of people we had a lot of hands up. People who want friendly chickens. That's probably the second question that I get is which one is the most friendly? Tell people Buff Orpingtons are like the golden retriever of the chicken world. They're pretty much universally nice. Like all chickens have their own personalities. I've talked to multiple people today about broody hens. It's like, well, that's not typical of that breed. They have their own personalities. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. So Orpingtons are really nice, all color variations. Brahmas, Plymouth Rocks, Bielefelders. That's a Bielefelder. His name was also Fred because we don't actually change any names. So it's just, they're all Fred. It's even the girls. So typically, if people ask, like, oh, I don't know what kind of bird to get, I'm new, I say get a brown egg layer. Get an assortment of brown egg layers. So brown egg layers are typically a bigger bird than a white egg layer. They're more adapted, they're hardier, they're typically friendlier, they're less flighty. So all of those traits are what make nice family animals. So I don't worry about, the Bielefelders are terrific birds. McMurray's Hatchery Flock, as I bought eggs online, incubated them in an incubator on my house, and I raised them up for 3 years. So my kids could go out as babies and pick up the hens and the roosters. And they were just cool with it. So, and I built that flock up, and that's our flock of Bielefelders. So, do you have a question or? So, are there certain breeds that get along better if you're picking out breeds? Yeah, I had that conversation with a couple earlier. They put some new chickens together, so they were full grown, and they put them together, and the white ones got picked on. There's always going to be an odd duck and chickens have, that's called the pecking order. That's because they're, even regardless of what we think, there's always the bottom one. Someone's always on the bottom. A lot of times that is a white bird or something that's odd to the flock. Polish tend to get picked on a lot. The first one with feathers almost always gets picked on. So if that first feather comes out of that tail and they're down, the other chickens are pecking it. Like, it's like, well, what's that? Like, that's unique. So you don't want to be the first. You also don't want to be the last, the smallest. So it's a hard, the barnyard's not a fun, it's not a fun area sometimes. So that's life too. But, so yeah, certain breeds get along better. Yep. Yeah. All right. Where's my mouse? I can't find my. We're gonna click. There we go. It went, and I couldn't even see. So we talked about climate a little bit. There's cold hardy birds, and there's heat tolerant birds. Your cold birds, your Orpingtons, your Brahmas, your Plymouth Rocks. They're bigger birds. They're more acclimated to survive in a colder climate. They typically have smaller combs. If they're named after a state, that's a pretty good thing. Like, they typically will fit in anywhere in the United States. So that's your Rhode Island Reds. That's your New Hampshire Reds, which are pretty much the same chicken except bigger. But then, Plymouth Rocks, that's after Massachusetts. So Icelandic birds are from Iceland. They're going to do well in the cold. So bigger birds do better in the cold. That's pretty common knowledge. So chickens also develop everywhere in the world. Your Mediterranean breeds, your Minorcas, your Leghorns, they're very heat tolerant birds. You're going to see that they have larger combs. They have smaller body size. So the comb is how chickens expel their temperature. It's a vascular system. So a lot of blood through the comb, and where they're able to dissipate heat through that comb, and that's how they're able to. They don't sweat. White egg layers are typically smaller birds, so they're more cold tolerant. The big thing is watching the combs, especially with roosters. In the winter, anytime it's below freezing, you are susceptible to frostbite if it's a wet and humid environment. Yeah. Oh, clever. Look at that. I didn't even have to read it. So. No. There we go. That's my goal. Like, I've been breeding chickens for over 10 years. I've got about 20 more years, and I'd like to get a giant chicken. That's how you know I did it. It will be terrifying. Chickens are the closest living descendant to Tyrannosaurus Rex, so we're going to go backwards in time. And so does experience matter? So as a beginner chicken keeper, yes, it does. Some chickens are harder to raise than others. They're flighty birds require a different type of coop. Bigger birds require shorter fences. But flightier birds are more, they're flighty because they're actually looking out for predators. And you are a predator, so they're watching you, but they're also looking out for dogs or coyotes or owls or hawks. So while they're not as fun to keep, they are probably going to live longer than your Brahmas, who can't jump over 3 foot tall, who are just happy to eat the corn on the ground. They're more likely to get pecked off. Everything likes chicken, including the neighbor's dog. Dogs are the number one chicken killer in backyard flocks. So raccoons are right up there too. So it's you will learn along the way, and it's okay. And that's really kind of the terrific part about chickens is it's not hard. It is super easy. Anybody see our brooder setup? It's really easy. They have food and they have water and they have heat. It doesn't require a whole lot of extra care. Chickens will let you know when they're distressed. So if they were upset, if they were out of something, if they were too hot or too cold, they will vocalize it just like a baby. You're gonna hear them. If you check on them, during the day, audibly you will know that there's something wrong. They'll let you know. So it's just like a baby. They need a diaper change. So rare breeds are typically rare for a reason. It's not because nobody wanted them, or it's not because they weren't something. It could be low fertility. It could, it's just because they're dumb. And that's the hard part of it. So rare and exotic aren't common because of either the experience level required to keep it, which isn't necessarily a try not gatekeep, Polish or anything, but man, they're dumb. So, all right. So that's pretty much my slideshow. But I would love to answer questions. So I got one right here, yellow.
Actually, we got two. Pretty recently, friends of ours gave their small, that's 11, 42 now. But anyway, the hens and the rooster were in such small confinement at this other place that they picked the feathers out of his bare butt fluid. Will those grow back to the place?
So they peck the feathers off the rooster. Will they grow back? Yes, they will grow back. They're going to grow back pretty slowly, but I'm not necessarily saying they're not going to also continue to peck them out because it's going to be slightly different than it was. But also, like I said, the barnyard isn't like super conforming. It's not a hot, it's they're it could be amino acids, acid deficiency where they're actually pecking feathers in order to try to eat them. They'll eat their feathers. It could be they're just jerks. Give them something to do. Obviously, the more space, the easier it is for them to go off and get away from each other. Roosters don't typically roost. Some will, some won't. Giving extra roosting space will get the hens away from him. He doesn't sound like a very dominant rooster, which is also pretty chill. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing.
My next question is, how do you feel about the fermenting with feed?
How do I feel about fermenting feed? It's terrific. Absolutely, you should do it. Fermenting feed can reduce your feed cost 50% or more. And there's a couple of things with that. You don't even have to naturally ferment it. You could add water. So you could just soak your feed overnight. What that does is that makes the amino acids in your feed more palatable. So they're water soluble and they will break down in the water. So you're adding water weight, which there's zero caloric difference in water, but you're getting more feed because you've just added weight. But they're able to absorb more nutrients out of the feed within their intestines. So they will use more of what's already in the feed instead of expelling it. So absolutely, you ferment your feed, you're going to be way better off. You could also just add water the day before. It softens it up, and it will produce a similar. Fermenting adds a lot of probiotics within it. Chickens need probiotics within their intestine, so that will help also get more out of the same amount of feed. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, right back.
You mentioned the need for light.
Yep.
What kind of light bulb do you use?
What kind of light bulb do you use in the winter? It could be very simple. I just run string outdoor patio lights in my chicken coop. They're LED. I run LEDs. If you want to get really deep in the science, you can buy color changing ones. There are some studies that say the different infrared of whether a blue spectrum or a red spectrum will produce more eggs. But really, a light. I run LEDs. I don't do super bright. I like a 3500 K, somewhere in there.
And if you had a chicken run where the run was underneath, and everything is covered, would you need to supplement light in that?
Would you need to supplement if you had a covered run?
Yeah, like it's integrated.
The run is part of the coop. Yeah.
So there's no light, natural light.
They're able to get no, not necessarily. As long they don't have to get direct sunlight, and they don't have to have direct light. So even diffused light, it's still light in here. They're still absorbing some bouncing around. Your eggs are going to tell the story. If you're getting softer eggs, their shells aren't quite as thick, even though you maybe have free choice calcium out, then they're probably not getting enough vitamin D. So you could at that point say, well, maybe I need a window, or where they can get more direct access to the light. So, great question. Yeah, you had your hand up here. Yeah. Yep. What do you need for a coop? My first coop was a garden shed I got from my father-in-law. It was an 8x8, and it had about 3 2x4s total in it, and it was only held together by siding. It was the best coop. It was terrific. So you don't need a whole lot. They need a place to get out of the elements and not have like direct wind blowing on them. I like a. You can build one out of pallets as long as they're kind of more enclosed. Chickens are very adaptable. There are very expensive coops out there. Carolina coops start at $6,000. That's the most expensive part about a chicken is the coop. So it really depends on your put some thought into it before you start. It's like, I'm going to get 6 chickens, and you buy a really little small coop. And then you say, well, I need 12. And then you got to buy another coop. Well, you're never going to recoup those costs. So, but I also don't want to go all out. Like, I've typically built all my coops. They don't have to be fancy. I've only had power in this recent one once. They don't need a whole lot. They need a place out of the elements that's also safe from predators. Like, that's the biggest thing. So predators are going to eat more chickens if they don't have a safe coop. Do you need to move it? No, you don't need to move it. It's going to be muddy, where their run is, but that's just part of it, so it's just going to be dirt. Chickens need dirt, so they need to dust bathe. That's how they take care of the lice and mites on them. So having dirt, they're going to dig a hole. So they're gonna do it. You don't have to move it. You don't have to do. There's a coop right there that looks like it's been moved. Go to Pinterest. There's a ton of chicken coops on Pinterest, and then you build it. It's fun. It's part of the problem. Yeah. Okay.
My question is about integrating younger birds with existing birds.
Yep.
Out of the 10 existing birds, we have 6 roosters.
Yeah.
So we have 4 hens.
Yeah.
We got 5 more younger chickens, and we have them in the same run but separated. What's your theory about what is the best to do together?
So how do you integrate different groups of chickens? You said you have them where like they're able to see each other through the run or similar. That absolutely. So they're getting used to each other's presence. They know they're there. So as long as they're similar size, I don't typically have problems. You have probably too many roosters. Okay, so that was going to be another thing. You need to make chicken soup. Too many roosters are harem creatures. So a rooster will have a harem of hens that he will take care of, and so they will fight over that. So a dominant rooster may have up to 20 hens that he keeps the other roosters away from. So a rule of thumb is about 1 in 10 hens to roosters. So in smaller flocks, like 2 roosters isn't necessarily a big deal either, and it depends on the breed and the time of the year too. So I like to put them together at night. So you've already kind of done the step where they know they coexist. At night, as they go on the roost, I'll go in with the headlamp, pick them up, put them on the roost next to each other, and then they kind of go, oh, hey, Fred's here. So, yeah, they're all Fred. So, yep. So I like to integrate them at night. So you've already done the step of keeping them, aware of each other, and then just put them in. So there you go. You're up.
You had said it earlier with egg layers, the diminishing returns of eggs 20% every year. I thought maybe you might be implying that after a certain period of time, you should figure out another meat for those birds, like maybe stew chicken.
Absolutely.
What's the window of time you like to do stew chicken?
So when do you turn them into stew?
When are they too late to turn out?
So old roosters aren't really good for anything more than broth, to be honest. They're going to taste great as broth, but old hens are really flavorful. I think you can still get meat. So how old is too old to eat? I would say around that 2-year-old hen is going to be delicious, the best chicken you've ever had flavor. You will have to stew it. You'll have to simmer or braise it in some liquid for a while. Brining it will help quite a bit. It's going to be a little bit tougher. You could shred it and make chicken tacos or something like that. Anything probably after that 2-year window, make some broth. It's going to be great broth, but you're not probably going to have a whole lot of meat on there that you're going to want to eat. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So she integrated 2 groups, and the older ones are keeping the chickens out of not letting them out of the run or not letting them do the food. So with integrating chickens, they will never fully integrate. So they will keep 2 separate groups. You will always have Group A and Group B. Even after 2 weeks, you could put 2. If I'm putting chicks down, I don't like to do more than 2 weeks difference in age as chicks. So if I put chicks down 1 week, maybe didn't get any that I brought home the next week, 2 to 3 weeks. That's my where they're able to grow together. But they don't necessarily fully integrate. So how do you keep them from being bullies? They're just jerks. So yeah. How do you? I don't know that I have a good answer for that. Honestly, you could try mixing up your flock order. So anytime you add or remove chickens they have to readjust their pecking order. So if you've got a dominant hen in there, which a lot of times it ain't always the rooster, it's the hen. Everyone knows the woman's in charge. That was kind of a joke, but yeah. So you could try removing, if you see there's a super dominant hen that seems to be more of the culprit, maybe remove her for a little while and see if that could change the dynamic. It might be that you just need to get rid of her. That might be, sometimes that's the answer, and it's not a great one. But yeah, what you got back here? So. Is there a temperature that you can incubate? No, but there is a temperature you can incubate to get more roosters than hens. Which is weird. So if we have problems within our incubation cycle, I hatch anywhere between 250,000 hens or chicks a week. If we've had issues within the incubation cycle, maybe we lost power, or we have big generators, but there's always something. I've had things happen. Mother Nature is a cruel mistress. Anytime you stress those eggs, we will get exponentially higher yields of roosters than hens. I have never gotten a ideal situation where we've done when we got more hens than roosters. It is always exponentially more roosters than hens. So I don't know why. Well, I don't know why. I haven't figured that one out. There are some studies that talk about lights and putting, blue or green lights within the incubator, and the different light patterns will produce hens. If people could figure that out, I'd be out of business, but because you could do it on your own. But okay, yeah. All right. Yeah.
Brand new to the chicken world, there's so many different opinions of shavings.
Yeah.
Sand in your food. What do you recommend?
So my opinion is the only one that matters. So what do you put in your coop, shavings or sand? It's going to be where you are. Some of it's going to be your climate. I prefer shavings. I prefer a large flake over a small flake. I don't like sand, but a lot of people do. It works really well in runs, but it doesn't. If it beats mud. Sand beats mud for sure. It's how much maintenance do you want to do? I clean out my coop 2 times a year, in the spring and fall. That's the only time I do a deep litter method. I will have anywhere between a foot of sawdust or shavings within that. It depends on what's cheapest for you. A lot of people did corn cobs, but nobody does whole corn anymore. So it's harder to get those ground up cobs. They worked really well. They were super absorbent. I like the shavings because I use it as compost in my garden. I don't have a use for more sand. I'd have to like build more stuff because I was like, well, I got sand, like make a pad. So there's no right or wrong. It's what's going to work for you. So sand works. It does require a little bit more maintenance. Kitty litter scoop, you're cleaning it out. Otherwise, you will grow bacteria just like anything else. So I like the bedding. I don't like the fine shavings. I don't like sawdust. It's too close to what the feed is. So, yep. So that's not helpful. Yeah. Yeah. What you got?
At what age do you for sure know if you're going to be a rooster? Because you have one hen
Yeah.
that is crowing, but her tail feathers are still hens.
What age do you know it's a rooster? I have culled all my roosters from the flock at 20-some weeks old, and then come out 2 weeks later, and I was like, "Where'd you come from?" So it could be just delayed. Henny feathering is a type of feathering pattern within chickens that the hens look. Okay. Yep. Some hens crow. Some hens crow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's gonna size. Size is probably your number one thing. If it's a black Australorp, your roosters are probably realistically, knee high or better. Your hens are going to be a lot shorter and squattier. I always say, like, once you have the rooster, it's a full-grown rooster, you don't question whether the other one's a roosters anymore. Like, you go, oh, yeah, there it is. Like, that's easy. After 8 weeks, you can get most of them. I said sometimes there's an odd one that's just weird. That's genetics too. It could be 20 weeks, 24 weeks, and go, well, where'd you? Like, I don't know where you came from. So, yeah. Do you want to, like, what's your odds of getting a rooster? What was your question? Should you get a rooster? So, yes, absolutely. Should you get a rooster? Everyone should have roosters. I'm biased. And then name them Fred. But, so roosters have jobs. So a rooster's job is protection and to find food. So roosters have over 100 different vocalizations that they can make to a hen. A hen only has 30. So in the chicken world, roosters are a lot more chatty, which is actually in the people world too. It's scientifically proven that men talk more. That's why I'm up here. So their job is to say, hey, look up. There's a hawk, or take cover, or so. If you want fertilized eggs, Fred, who drowned, was actually attacked by probably a raccoon, and he was wounded, and that's how he ended up in the pond. But he protected his hens. That was his job. So it will save you probably a hen down the road to have a rooster. So, yeah.
$1,000,000 question. How do you tell one day old or first few days old whether it is a little hen or whether it's a rooster?
How do you tell a day-old chick? No. You go to a hatchery, and you find the chicken sexers, and you spend about 2 years with them, and then you'll be able to do it. If there was a magic bullet, I'd love to share. I talk about this tomorrow a little bit, so not necessarily helpful. There's no magic way. At a day old, you vent sex them. So you're looking at the cloaca, so that's their butt. So the chicken parts are all internal. So when you're opening the cloaca, you're turning it inside out, and you're looking for the penis. So it's not like an outie. It's like, oh, there's a shiny bump. That's how you do it. So if anybody could do it, I'd also be out of business. So I'm not trying to tell you can't, but like you just practice, and you'll be able to do it. A magnifying glass will help a little bit because it's real small. It's a really small bump. So there's a lot of wives' tales about like different size eggs. Like none of them actually work. So cool. I've talked a lot over here. Anybody have questions over here? There you are.
The number one killer being a dog.
Number one killer is dogs.
Is there a livestock dog that for chicken friendly and effective?
Yeah, lots of them. Yeah, I'm not an expert in that. Is there a livestock dog that protects chicken? Yes. There are. It's not something I've delved into with. I mean, livestock guardian dogs or Pyrenees or like can be trained. Technically, the number one killer of chickens is people, but then like dogs are second by a long ways. But then unintentional ones for sure. But I don't know any like breed specific. There's a Jordan's here with dogs with the Aussie Homestead. She might have a better answer, or you have anything? No, I don't know. I don't know that very well. So they absolutely can do it. A lot of people put geese in too. They will keep some predators away. Won't necessarily keep everything away. The bigger predator, obviously, will also just take your geese. So. What you got? Yep, right here. What was that? I love deep bedding because I only clean out twice a year. But it also improves the chicken's ability to fight off other diseases and infections. So and then I like compost. So it actually lowers. It's half composted already, and it also produces heat. Why I don't clean it out in the winter is because that bottom layer is actually composting, is producing heat. So the deeper your compost is actually an insulation barrier, and it is actually producing heat as it's breaking down in the winter. Our winters where we spent a full week at 20 below, my coop didn't have heat, so they did just fine. So I love deep. That's what works for me. So good question. Here we are. Yep. You have a Great Pyrenees? He likes. Yeah. If they're out foraging all day and you're just supplementing overnight, so kind of the misconception is like, oh, I'm going to pasture raise these birds. I'm not going to have to feed them. It's like you still have to feed them. Like they're going to eat just slightly lower than they would have anyway. They're omnivores. They're going to eat bugs and they're going to eat seeds. So unless you have like really nice big seed heads or a lot of natural bugs within that, so crickets, spiders, they'll eat snakes, they'll eat other chickens, like they'll eat mice, like they love all that stuff. I would probably stay with a 16% layer over a 22% layer. I think you're paying more for protein that you probably don't necessarily need, especially if they're foraging all day. They're probably getting a pretty good amount of protein just out and about. You probably have very little spiders. So, yeah, it's good. It's a good question. Yep. So, thin eggs. So make sure that you have calcium. So there's a couple of things: calcium, grit, and then vitamin D. You can buy vitamin D at Walmart in a dropper bottle. It's super concentrated. It's. They cut me off. All right. Well, it's time then. It is time, and I will be done. So, if you have thin eggs, you can add free choice calcium. In a layer, there's also calcium in it. They can absorb it all they want. If they're not, they can eat it all they want. If they're not absorbing it, then it's probably a vitamin D issue. You can buy vitamin D at Walmart in a dropper bottle. It's very, very concentrated. You can just put like a drop in their gallon of water, and that'll help with their vitamin D. So, thank you very much.